Hello and welcome to The Tonight Show.
Coming up, President Higgins claims Donald Trump's climate policy is regressive and pernicious on the eve of his visit to Ireland. Is he right not to roll out the red carpet?
And more turmoil for Sinn Féin as Leonie Riada has conceded in the Ireland South elections. Is it time for them to re-evaluate?
Our panel: Martin Collins from Pavey Point, Fine Gael Senator Catherine Noone, Independent MEP Luke Ming-Flanagan, financial expert and columnist Carl Dieter, and businesswoman and publisher Nora Casey.
And later, a hard-hitting new report calls for sanctions against local authorities which failed to spend money on traveller accommodation.
Get in touch via Twitter with the hashtag TonightVMTV. But first, here's Michael Ryan with the news.
Thanks, Matt. Good evening. Fake news. That's how the US President has described protests against his official visit to the UK. Today, President Trump met with Theresa May in London, where Brexit was on the agenda. A massive security operation is underway here ahead of the US President's arrival tomorrow. Air Force One is due to touch down at Shannon Airport tomorrow afternoon. The President and First Lady will be greeted by the Taoiseach before they head to the Trump Hotel in Doonbeg in Clare. The father of one of the boys accused of the murder of Anna Kriegel has told the Central Criminal Court that he knows his son was not capable of doing anything like that. The prosecution finished its evidence today. Both boys, who can't be named for legal reasons, deny murdering the schoolgirl. Her body was found at an abandoned house in Lucan in Dublin in May of last year. Sinn Féin has withdrawn its request for a recount in the European elections in Ireland South, conceding defeat on behalf of its MEP Leonie Riada. The count will resume tomorrow to decide the order of the remaining seats. Sean Kelly and Billy Callagher were elected last week. Mick Wallace is on course to take the third seat, with Deirdre Clune and Grace O'Sullivan battling it out for the fourth seat. A fifth seat only comes into play when Brexit happens. Police in Australia have arrested a man following a shooting that left 4 people dead in Darwin. The shooting started at a hotel and the suspect then drove to a number of other locations in the city. Witnesses say he was armed with a shotgun. The suspect was eventually arrested when he arrived at the police headquarters, where it's thought he may have been trying to turn himself in. Police say the man was known to them and are not treating it as a terror attack. And the Justice Minister has branded those who get involved in gangland crime as losers and has warned young people that there's no future in it. He met senior Gardaí and local community group leaders in Coolock today following 3 gun murders in North Dublin in recent weeks. The Minister says every effort will be made to bring the small number of people in the area who are responsible to justice. Those are the late news headlines. It's back to you, Matt and Ivan.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Well, Sinn Féin has withdrawn this evening its request for a full recount in the Ireland South European elections. The decision means the party's candidate, Leonie Riada, has lost her seat. She will be eliminated tomorrow, and her votes will then decide Mick Wallace's election and the likelihood that Deirdre Clune will be passed by Grace O'Sullivan for the 4th and 5th seat. Congratulations, Luke Ming, on your election. Just to draw a line under, because that will complete the election then, what did you make of what the electorate said in terms of the significant halving of Sinn Féin's vote, notwithstanding McCarthy's election, and yet other left-wing candidates like Claire Daly and Mick Wallace did get elected? What do you think the people, was it personalities they voted for or what?
Well, first off, I just want to commiserate with Leah, because I've got to know her over the last 5 years and the work that she's done on the Fisheries Committee. And I'm not just saying that. We would have monitored an awful lot of her work on the committee, and when the votes came to the full plenary, we would have taken note of what direction she would have voted on it, because generally it went along the lines that we wanted it to go along. So we'll miss her from that point of view, and I'm disappointed for her. I have to say I'm surprised at how badly Sinn Féin performed in the local elections. Not so surprised about the European elections because of the entry into the race of Claire Daly and Mick Wallace. I always thought it was going to be difficult in Dublin and Ireland South for them to maintain their seats there, and for Mick Wallace and Claire Daly to also take a seat. So there's a variety of factors there, but I have to say the biggest emotion I have is I'm surprised because I listen to what they say. I listen to them having a go at the government over the fact that they fail to house people, fail to provide us with a decent health service. Many places around where I live, we can't even drink the water. So I thought to myself, surely this will resonate well, and it didn't.
On that, every night the likes of you are banging away, but the real overall winners of the Euro elections were Fine Gael. They gained a seat, and the real winners of the local elections, the people propping up Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, a huge number of councillors, 280 councillors, and up 2%. I mean, like, what does it say?
What it says is a lot of people in Ireland have very low expectations. A lot of people in Ireland seem to think that we can never have a better health service than that. You know, that's the way it is. We can never have housing for everyone. That's the way it is. But sorry, I'm more ambitious than that, and I think it should be kind of a basic right, not a luxury.
You low expectations people have, so they let you away with poor performance.
Well, I think it probably shows, and no disrespect to any individual candidate, but I think it probably shows that people don't necessarily respond that well to the having a go politics, where people don't necessarily want to get involved in government or actually
got him re-elected.
Proactive. And yeah, no, it does. I'm not saying it'll never get anybody elected.
Served you well,
it is easy to be,
My
critical
passing of amendments served
and,
well.
and to be down with everything, and that kind of, off with their head type of politics that Sinn Féin go on with. It obviously doesn't clearly resonate with the electorate.
Okay, Nora, we do have a number of women who have been elected. I mean, many women. We have Frances Fitzgerald, Claire Daly in Dublin, little Grace O'Sullivan and Deirdre Clune in Ireland South. But what does it say when you have strong performing women like Leonie Riada and Lynn Boylan, who, whatever people might think of the party they represent, we have to say they've been very, very hard-working, effective politicians, that these women are rejected by the electorate? What does that say?
Well, I do feel for Leonie Riada, and I just want to point out that her replacement is likely to be a woman as well, which is great news. I do think that people don't necessarily look at gender sometimes when they're voting in the elections. I think they look at personalities. And I know what you're saying about, I think it's terrible to say that the electorate has low expectations. I think they have very high expectations. But I think it's very much down to personality politics at the moment. And people don't necessarily see the party. And maybe Sinn Féin didn't do so well because they've spent quite a lot of time maybe attacking personalities rather than saying what they're going to do themselves. I think that people are very intolerant of that. And I'm not a member of any political party. But myself, I think that kind of politics just drains people a little bit. They'd like to see people who are proactive, coming out with positive policies, saying what they would do when they get into power. They're not necessarily into negative politics.
Yeah, but the shift in Sinn Féin away from the Gerry Adams and the late Martin McGuinness access has been very female-focused. Michelle O'Neill in the north, Mary Lou MacDonald as leader, these high-profile MEPs, one of whom was a presidential candidate. And it seems to be going awry for Sinn Féin. Could it have anything to do with gender?
No, I think an awful lot of it has to do with Northern Ireland as well. I think that Northern Ireland has been in the focus. Like all we've talked about is Northern Ireland over the last few months. There's no doubt people are a little fed up with Stormont, the fact that devolution is still not up and running, that Northern Ireland's been run by civil servants with the odd shot coming from Westminster. And I think that people see that the inertia in Sinn Féin perhaps has contributed to that.
Okay, apparently one of the things that President Donald Trump is going to be talking to Leo Varadkar about tomorrow at Shannon Airport is how Stormont has become stalled. Can't see that particular conversation going on for too long with Donald Trump. But one man who is delighted to see the American president come to Ireland is the owner of the Wild Atlantic Break Cafe in Doonbeg. That's Rita McInerney. Rita, thank you for joining us. And why are you happy about this?
Well, it's very important for a community like ours to have the focus of the international media on us and to be able to showcase what we have in West Clare.
Is there any hope, Rita, that he will come down into the village and go beyond his own resort?
You never know. He might. He's very unpredictable. So you never know. He might. Well, the village is ready. If he does decide to come to Doonbeg, he's welcome to come into the Doonbeg, and we'll show him Céad Míle Fáilte.
But Rita, does this mean the people of West Clare are going to put aside your political principles all because of the money that Donald Trump has brought into the area?
Well, we believe that it's up to our government to highlight the issues that we differ on, and certainly I wouldn't be a supporter of many of his policies. But this isn't a state visit, it's a private visit. The Trump Organization own a significant property in Doonbeg that is a huge employer in the area. So he's perfectly entitled to come to Doonbeg and to visit the area. And also you have to respect the office of the presidency and how important the US is to Ireland and to places like Clare and the Midwest. So we can differentiate the Trump organisation and their involvement in Doonbeg from the Trump presidency.
And will he get his wall?
The coastal protection, we are very supportive of the coastal protection because this is something that is badly needed. It is something that is similar to what has been done in other parts of the west coast of Ireland. So we see no reason why the coast shouldn't be protected at Duffmore like it has been protected in other places. And this would pave the way for further development.
Rita McInerney, thank you very much for joining us from the Wild Atlantic Break Cafe in Doonbeg. Enjoy the next couple of days.
Thank you very much.
Our panel is now going to discuss the Trump visit. Carl Dieter, it's very populist for people to rain on Trump's parade. Not only the left, but even Matt Cooper and people don't really welcome the man. But the point I want to put to you is an economic point. We have 700 firms, American firms here. Up to 2015, they'd invest the guts cumulatively of 390 billion in Ireland. It's almost a unique relationship. And if you take direct and indirect employment, about 1 in 5 people in this country are in some way in a job tonight because of American investment. Surely it's the case that if Leo or Michael D was going to Washington, we wouldn't like it if people were protesting. Surely we owe some respect to the office.
Yeah, I think that people have a hard time these days, though, discerning between their own spoiled brat feelings about anything in life and that of what classical diplomacy is really about. If you look at what traditional diplomacy is about, it's about looking at what's good for you and responding accordingly. And that means that things like all the stuff you've just spoken about should be remembered when you're staging how this visit should go. It's interesting that you have someone like Michael D. Higgins upset, given that he was willing to rub shoulders with Xi Jinping, who's the president of China. And this is a person who, it's 30 years ago was Tiananmen Square. Today, they're still no freer today than they were then. There's 1 million people in prison camps called re-education camps, mostly Muslim, who they want to teach the correct way to be a good Chinese person. You have massive disasters happening over there on a human rights front. No one says anything.
We brought Xi Jinping to Croke Park.
Yeah, and he thinks he's great. And leaders on the left are always like that. It's the same way Jeremy Corbyn was giving out about Trump. Jeremy Corbyn was paid for by a Palestinian rights group to go and have a nice visit with Bashar al-Assad, a man who chemical bombs innocent people. So when you see these inherent contradictions, it just reinforces my belief that it's spoiled brat mentality, forgetting what the real game is about, which is the continuity of Western values and the solidifying of relationships that really matter to us.
Luke, I'm going to summarise what Ivan said in a sentence. We're bought, so we'll stay bought.
I don't think the firms that you talk about are here because we are nice to President Trump, or if we were nice to President Clinton or nice to Barack Obama. They're here because of our low tax rate. They're here because we speak English. They're here because we have access to the EU market of 500 million people. And to be quite honest, many of the companies that are here, social media companies, wouldn't be big fans of his either. And there would be a lot of liberals among that community. So the idea that they would run for the hills if we insulted Donald Trump by telling him we're not happy with them ridiculing immigrants, calling all Mexicans rapists, laughing at people because they have special needs, I think they'd have more respect for us. And if it had anything to do with keeping the firms here, I think it would help bring more here.
Could I put it to you, it's a little bit deeper than that. It's a little bit deeper than Trump insofar as we have two alliances. We're part of a European Union, but we also are part of an English-speaking and previously white American Anglo alliance. And it's part of our culture, it's part of our history, and is one of the reasons why they invest here.
Yeah, and also part of our history is a thing called boycott, and you punish people for doing absolutely horrible things to other people. And let's say you're in Ireland today and you have a child with special needs, and we roll out the red carpet to someone who makes it okay, like they used to do when I was in school many years ago, laugh at people with special needs, ignorant buffoons. Now we have an ignorant buffoon who's the leader of the free world. I think it's up to him. I think it's up to us
tenuous
to
example
actually...
you could hope for. That, Luke, you're a
by
smart
your
guy.
standards,
You
maybe
can do
that's a
better
low
than that.
blow.
Whereas,
At
how
least-
is it tenuous
at least
to have
meet
a
us
problem
halfway
with someone
logically.
ridiculing people with special needs? How is
He
it...
apologized.
You're
actually,
saying
for
that if someone did that,
No, we don't.
okay, that he therefore is ridiculing everyone across the world, that if he wasn't happy about certain people in Mexico, that therefore it's against the whole...
Sorry then, it's only people with special needs, immigrants, Mexicans,
But it's
and
not- I mean,
basically everyone he doesn't like.
He's married to immigrants. Whole
mother
swathes
was
of
an
his
immigrant.
team.
I
are
know, I
immigrants.
bring Mark
That
in.
makes it
It's
even worse,
actually-
doesn't
it's
it?
not even logical.
It's more
That's what
appalling
you're saying
then.
is,
Yeah, it is more appalling.
and you know what the thing is, when you talk about the border along with Mexico, I grew up in that area. It's a complex situation. You're just looking at it saying, oh, it has to be racism. It's about a lot of other things too.
The way he worded
the way you
it,
distill it down,
was racist. Whatever about his policies, the way he worded
whatever
it,
about the way
were
he worded
racist.
it, why are you not talking about the fact that he wants to decriminalize same-sex relationships all over the world? No one's talking about that, but he's saying that to the Iranians. They're all saying, oh, he's all friends with Russia. He's out there trying to get the Germans to stop buying Russian fuel, providing weapons to the Ukrainians. Standard
I'm
protocol.
just so picky. I don't like people ridiculing people with
Perhaps-
special needs. I'm
perhaps
just so
bringing
picky.
peace
I will remain
to the
so
world
picky.
by relationships with
I want to
North
bring Mark
Korea.
in.
We can talk for the next 5
President-
hours. You
lads,
won't change
hold
me
on.
mind.
President Higgins today also spoke about the excluded being vulnerable to xenophobes, homophobes and racists. Now, no matter how much we might agree, or many people would agree with President Michael D. Higgins, is it wise diplomatically to start talking about things like that the day before the American president is coming, albeit for a private visit, but when he is meeting our Taoiseach?
Well, somebody once said, Matt, that the art of diplomacy is promoting your ideals while protecting your interest. And I think that's what's required at this very moment on the eve of Trump's visit. And I, as much as other right-thinking, decent people, find his policies and his views repulsive. I think he is a vile human being. I do believe he is inherently racist, xenophobic, homophobic, misogynistic. I think the evidence is, in my opinion, very conclusive in that regard. But I don't believe in a policy of isolation. I don't believe in this view that he should not be, invited to Ireland. I think it's an opportunity for Irish people to make their views very clear, very unambiguous, and very equivocal in terms of condemning his
but
politics
Martin,
of division, racism, and
Okay, Martin, and
homophobia.
you're not alone in holding all of those labels against him. But I happened to spend 16 weeks in the States when the election was on. And whether you like it or not, he got 46% of the vote. And what he did do was he articulated for a lot of people in Middle America that, you know what, globalization and open borders had a downside. And that's politics, and he's entitled to get a mandate for that.
I don't dispute that. It was a democratic process. He was elected as a president, but Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. And I heard Ken Livingston, I think this morning on the radio, saying that it was because of their distorted system of getting the president over the line that actually got Trump over the line. But the popular vote was won by Hillary Clinton.
But that's because huge votes on East and West Coast come in.
In terms of the evidence, let's remind ourselves, this is a man who has banned transgender people from joining the military. This is a man and his administration that has sidelined all of the affirmative action measures that the Obama regime put in place to promote ethnic diversity within the university system. This is a man under his watch there has been a 20% increase in hate groups in the States. Under his watch, there has been, for 3 consecutive years, there has been an increase in hate crimes in the States. And don't tell me there's no correlation between these developments and him being in office.
Okay, how much ass-kissing is going to be done by Fine Gael people in Shannon tomorrow, Catherine?
Hopefully, well, not to go along with that phrase, but hopefully I suppose it will not be a diplomatic problem for the Taoiseach. I think that he has no alternative but to welcome the diplomatically elected President of the United States to
But not to go to his
Ireland.
golf course in Doonbeg. He's drawn the line at that. He won't go any further than Shannon, will he?
Yeah, and that's fair enough, I think. And Trump has chosen not to come to Dublin to visit the Taoiseach. That, you know, you could equally be critical of that stance. I mean, I'd agree with nearly everything that has been said on different levels. I mean, most people in Ireland abhor Trump's politics, and to me he represents a lot of things that I absolutely do not believe in, and he normalises a type of language and rhetoric that is completely unacceptable.
But is he allowed to get away with it because of the office that he holds, in the sense that
to a
the
degree.
British today have sort of fawned over him because he's holding the office? Is this going to happen? Are we going to have people like the time when Michael Noonan welcomed him 5 years ago, when he wasn't even a presidential candidate, a red carpet out there for a businessman, harpists come out, all because the guy was bringing a few quid in to buy a distressed asset?
Well, I mean, I suppose it means a lot to people locally in Clare that they have 300, I think I heard on the radio today, maybe 360 people employed at various stages throughout the year because of a hotel that he indirectly owns or he stood back from or whatever. That is a positive thing for County Clare, especially has been over years where things were more difficult. But, you know, I go back to the point that we didn't elect him. You know, the Americans chose him, and whether we like the system of election over there or not, he came through it, and we have no choice but to welcome him, much as we dislike him. And I don't think we're necessarily condoning anything that he says or does. We're simply acknowledging...
Will Leo challenge Nora, just one particular point that Carl made there, that a lot of people who condemn Trump are less rigorous about defending or attacking Putin in the Ukraine, or the Iranian proxy situations, or Chinese human rights. Are we fair?
We have totally dual standards. I do agree with that there have certainly been leaders in this country that, you know, come from regimes which are, you know, indefensible, and perhaps we sometimes give them the honour that we're not going to give Trump. But I will say one thing. There's a lot of discussions about respect for the office rather than the man. Trump himself doesn't respect the office. You know, before he even landed in London, he was tweeting Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, with the most childish tweet about him being a stone-cold loser and how he should focus on crime and not on the presidency.
He wasn't tall enough.
And he wasn't tall enough, commenting on his stature. So I do think that his behaviour is so erratic that it allows other people to believe that we don't have to respect the office, because he doesn't necessarily do so either. I do think that the worst thing to happen to us now over the next 2 days will be we spent 10 million on security for somebody to have a private visit to his own private hotel, and I do agree the country will be divided between Doonbeg and Clare versus the rest of the country in terms of welcoming him to this island, and he will stand on Irish soil, and rather than it being a big massive boost for multinationals, he will stand on Irish soil and say, I want that revenue back. Because since he's been elected, he's talked about getting that revenue back. And he will criticise Ireland for its corporation tax.
So you're saying the Taoiseach shouldn't meet him?
No, I think the Taoiseach should meet him. I do agree with that. I think that he's head of our state, and I think he should go and meet him, and he's meeting him at the airport, and he's not going to Doonbeg. But it would be terrible for us to spend 10 million on his visit and for him to stand on our soil and criticise us for something that he has spoken about previously.
And I'll tell you something else we're going to have to talk about in a moment. His Brexit position as well. I mean, he's there today and he's talking about Nigel Farage, his big mate, should be negotiating a no-deal Brexit, which would be significant consequences for us as well.
Okay, we'll continue with this discussion and get into that and other issues after the break.
Welcome back. Now, Karl Dieter, your president, is coming to Shannon tomorrow. Apparently, he's going to be talking to Leo Varadkar about three things. Stormont, which, as we said earlier, is unlikely to take up much time. Visas for Irish people in the United States. But the main thing is going to be Brexit. And this is interesting because the comments he's made about Brexit in the last couple of days, trying to encourage Britain to go for a no deal so that they could end up doing a better trade deal with the United States, is completely against our interests. And it also means we'd have the border back in this island. And can you imagine trying to explain to Donald Trump, who said today that nothing is more important than borders, how we actually don't want a border in this island?
Yeah, well,
if you look at what you're saying there, visas for Irish people, incredibly important. That's where I think diplomacy has to be remembered. And when you look at Brexit, it's not unusual for an American president to weigh in on that. Barack Obama did the same thing when he said back in 2015.
Nigel Farage was outraged that there should be any such attempt made to interfere in the electoral process.
And it's the usual thing where he's outraged about that but delighted with whatever Trump says. So look, let Nigel Farage be a hypocrite on his own time. But what I'm saying is it's not unusual for American presidents to weigh in on something like that. In the case of Barack Obama, he said, vote for Brexit, you're at the back of the line. What Trump has been doing, though, is carefully breaking down a lot of different agreements that are out there that he feels aren't serving American interest. And that's something that I think in one way you have to look at and say, well, how is that working out? So when you look at the environment, for instance, as far as I know, America was the only country that actually met their Paris Accord emissions, and they actually pulled out of it. So when Higgins says, oh, the U.S. is a disgrace on the environment, we're actually breaking the law all the time on that one, and yet that's okay. We get a pass because we're right-minded. People look at the things he says, and they're not actually looking at the things he does. And this is why, when you talk about something like Brexit, he's not going to influence whether it happens or not. But he is about making new avenues of trade.
He is actually holding out the prospect of an enhanced trade deal. Now, would the British be foolish enough to fall for that? Because as soon as they leave the European Union, they're in a weak position on their knees. Won't he exploit them and take advantage of that for America's benefit and screw the British?
I don't know that necessarily holds true, because that weak position you're talking about is one where, since they've announced Brexit, they've had record unemployment. European growth, may I add, is completely anemic. So when people talk about the British economy, there's stagnation
better in the European Union than it is in Britain.
No, well, look,
it is.
Time will have a good, strong look at Italy, but do not forget that it is an American interest, ever since going back to Benjamin Franklin, to encourage trade with other nations. And if he's offering some kind of incentive for the UK to do a deal with the USA, that's his job.
Surely, Luke, it's of concern in relation to Brexit that the Irish government have not seemingly penetrated beyond Capitol Hill. Nancy Pelosi said all the right things there. But in relation to the White House, what Donald Trump is saying is inimical to Irish interests.
Yeah, but the thing is, what Donald Trump said today and what he'll say tomorrow and what he'll say the following day, we don't know, because he could change his mind over and over again.
You think when he's in Ireland he'll say, well, we want to hear?
Well, maybe he will. And I hear Carl talk about how he's breaking things down and people shouldn't be judging him by what he's saying and what he's achieving and what he's doing. He should be judged by. Well, he'll be really judged by it very badly in the next American election if he goes ahead with these massive tariffs that he's talking about putting on goods coming from Mexico, because actually he'll damage his own economy. So
but is that not typical property tycoon? He puts out a position, it's a negotiating position from which he's actually intending to end up somewhere else.
Property tycoon has gone busted.
What I would love to know, though, is, like, we started off by talking about the benefit to Ireland by being nice to him. He's talking about, as you've said, he's talking about repatriating, trying to bring back a lot of these taxes that the multinationals pay here. Yeah, no, but how exactly is befriending that policy a good thing for us? He's talking about a hard Brexit and he's encouraging a hard Brexit. How exactly does that help us?
I'm just curious. Europe and
also apparently we're meant to worry that he'll move all of those companies out of Ireland if we're not nice to him. I'm just wondering, what exactly do we lose if we tell him straight up that we don't like misogyny, we don't like racism, we don't like sexism, and we don't really
appreciate
it.
I just want to ask you this, because I thought it was quite spectacular what the President had to say today at a Public Services Union conference in Dublin. On the eve of this visit, he not only said it was pernicious and regressive about climate policy, but he also went further and he said in relation to American multinationals, basically they were gaming the system and they were conning Europe on taxes. Wasn't that out of line insofar as that he's supposed to conform to government policy?
Yeah, I think they were controversial enough comments on the eve of a presidential visit, but I'd say they're in the tuppence halfpenny place compared to what Trump might actually say if the shoe was on the other foot. So
that doesn't make it right.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't.
Michael, do you want to watch it? He isn't very tall. He comes back with a killer line.
It doesn't make it right. But we should, and on that point, we should conduct ourselves, where he's concerned, as the President of the United States, correctly insofar as we can make points like a lot of us have made here tonight about how he behaves and his opinions on climate and misogyny and Brexit, we can make those comments. I mean, the Taoiseach may well address some of those comments, like other presidents have done on St. Patrick's Day, or other Taoiseach have done on St. Patrick's Day when in Washington. It's possible to make those points in a very nice way, in a diplomatic way, while he's in the room. Not that it'll make a blind bit of difference, because he's not a man who listens to what other people think.
Yeah,
anyway.
is there a degree of hypocrisy? Going back to what Carol said about climate change, we're a disaster when it comes to climate change, and we're lecturing the Americans. Michael D. Higgins today goes on about multinationals hiding money, and our government is involved in taking an action alongside Apple against the European Commission not to take tax money.
And the Europeans want our tax money too, by the way, so let's not make it out it's just the Americans.
Well, just before I answer that, to go back to Trump's comments about encouraging the British government to have a no-deal Brexit, and all of the implications that has for Ireland has been well rehearsed. And while I don't rate Trump as a politician, and certainly his very poor diplomatic skills, I would be worried by his comments, because he is obviously a tycoon. He's a very good set of business skills, and he knows how to negotiate a good deal and how to make money. So he could potentially have an offer on the table that the British government might find irresistible.
But there is one odious thing in this deal, the idea that part of the NHS will have to be handed over.
Yeah.
And even many of the Tories couldn't swallow that one, because it's the one thing they're all proud of in the UK. And if you have to, so in return for getting cheap chlorinated chicken into your country, if you have to sell your health service and then make yourself sick and have no health service to go to after eating that crap, it's a bad deal.
But Nora, this thing about him, being a businessman and a deal maker, I mean,
it's overplayed.
Terrible businessman.
Isn't he? I mean, like, he's a bullying, blustering, and often bust businessman.
Listen, when he brought out his book, what we now know is that he actually owed, millions and millions and was losing money left, right and centre. I often think if you have to say it, then it's not true. So a lot of those people who go out and do motivational talks and say how great they are, they've never run a business in their life, they don't know how to run businesses. I would say that...
there's an awful lot of Trump Towers when you drive around Boston,
I just took
Chicago,
a photo of it last
Washington.
weekend. I agree.
Yeah, there's lots of them around.
And golf courses in Scotland and...
But I would say one thing, the Brexit, so I think that what the UK papers are saying, that he's been slightly less insistent on Brexit than he has been in the past. Since the beginning he's talked about no-deal Brexit. So they're saying they've seen a weakening of his stance over the last few days. I do think that the own goal for him was the NHS. Absolutely. Once he said, and the NHS has to be on the table, you suddenly Twitter was lit up with people saying, don't you touch our NHS, we're not having your private healthcare providers over here, that's the jewel in our crown, nobody touches it. So when you say he's offering this, as he calls, phenomenal deal, in the case of Brexit, I don't think people really believe it. That could be in our favour. I think that sometimes he says things, nobody likes anybody interfering with their politics.
Okay. After this break, we're going to be changing topic. We're going to be discussing how one of the authors of a new hard-hitting report has said travellers are treated worse than refugees in Ireland. Does that person have a point? And is racism still alive and well in the land of 1,000 welcomes?
Welcome back. Ireland's being urged to take action on traveller accommodation, online abuse and hate crimes. A European Commission report on racism says local authorities have consistently failed to provide adequate accommodation for travellers, and the National Action Plan Against Racism is out of date by over a decade. Martin Collins, do you agree?
Yes, we do. We obviously welcome this report, and this is the fifth report published by ECRI, which is the European Commission on Racism and Intolerance, and it holds no punches. It's very strong, it's very clear, it's very direct, and essentially it's a call to action from the Irish government that they need to introduce policy and legislative reform to vindicate the rights of travellers and indeed other marginalised communities. It highlights in particular the accommodation crisis that we find ourselves in, and it calls for tougher sanctions to be imposed on local authorities who have failed to implement their travel accommodation programmes and have failed to draw down the allocated budgets. In fact, the local authorities collectively have failed to spend 55 million since the year 2000 up to the year 2000.
And who do you blame?
Well, unfortunately, there's an inherent racism within the local authority system and within the local authority structures. And as long as political representatives have some political influence over the provision and location of travel accommodation, NIMBY always comes to the fore, not in my backyard, and therefore travel accommodation does not get constructed. Politicians, local public representatives have informed me privately that they would like for travel accommodation to be taken out of their hands. They find it too difficult, too heavily politicised to deal with, and it's not a vote catcher. Unfortunately, if anything, it's a vote loser. So there is a very compelling case for some sort of a national independent agency to be established that will be mandated and will have the necessary legislative